Hello, I'm Kaese, Senior Manager Business Development for Hard Disk Drives at Toshiba Electronics Europe. And today, I will talk about the history of hard disk drive technology. In the 80s, we started with classical IBM PCs in offices and homes, and the first hard disk drives as we know it today was manufactured in the early 80s with a typical capacity of 20 megabyte in a 5.25 inch form factor. 20 megabyte at that time was quite enough, because at that time we didn't have any digital videos, pictures, not even office documents, but mainly source code, text, and program files. And that helped to introduce the digital business operations for offices. But of course, capacity was never enough. So in the same form factor, still 5.25 inch, at the end of a decade, we were at 150 megabyte. And now we are in the 90s. In the 90s, we had the digital office operations with the Words, PowerPoints, and Excels. So the few megabyte of the 80s were not enough. So in the 90s, we had a 425 megabyte hard disk drive. Still the 3.5 inch form factor. And hey, look at the controller board. Real vintage electronics. Discrete transistors, EPROMs, discrete components. The older ones of us will still remember that type of electronics. Also in the 90s, the form factor of the PCs became slimmer and more compact, and the hard disk drives followed this form factor. So also in 94, we had the 850 megabyte hard disk drive, now in the 3.5 inch form factor. And for even more compact systems, we had a smaller form factor. In 94, also 850 megabyte, but already in today's 2.5 inch form factor. And by the end of the decade, we were already at more than a gigabyte, 1.35 gigabyte in 1996. So now we are in the 2000s. And in the 2000s, two major things happened. First of all, we invented the digital paperless office. So we had scanned documents, we had videos, digital still pictures that had to be stored. So we needed much more capacity. And the other thing is, we had all these digital mobile devices. So digital music players, digital still cameras, compact laptops and notebooks, and hard disk drive had to support this technology. So in 2000, Toshiba launched a 2 gigabyte 1.8 inch PC MCIA hard disk drive that was used as storage expansion in laptops and mainly for digital still cameras. 2002, we already had 20 gigabyte in the 2.5 inch form factor, used for laptops of that generations. And in 2004, there was also a milestone of hard disk drive technology. So this tiny thing, 0.85 inch, is actually a real hard disk drive, not a flash component. So it has one platter, one head, spinning at 4,000 rotations per minute. And it has a capacity of 4 gigabyte and a SATA interface. And this was used in the first generation of the smartphone, what we at that time called the communicators. Later, we wanted to develop an 8 gigabyte version with one platter, two heads, but at that time, flash memory was already cost efficient enough to replace the hard disk drive and that type of mobile devices as we know it today. In the second half of the decade, we further increased the capacity. So this 146 gigabyte hard disk drive of 2007 spins at 15,000 rotations per minute. And this is intended for the main storage of business servers. That again was in the 3.5-inch form factor. Smaller form factors for laptops brought us to 160 gigabyte in 2008. And what we can see here is at that time, we had changed the interface from the parallel ATA to the serial ATA, as we still use it today. And finally, in 2009, we were at 320 gigabyte. This again is a 1.8-inch with a mini serial ATA form factor that brought us to basically the capacities that are still actual in these days. The 2010s, ever more data. So we had digital pictures with higher resolutions, we had 4K videos, we had big data, digital books and all these things to be stored locally. So for that, we launched in 2011 a 750 gigabyte 2.5-inch hard disk drives that was used in laptop computers, but also in USB connected external hard disk drives for backups and portable data. Also in 2012, we had the first 1 terabyte hard disk drives in a 3.5-inch form factor. And the major application for these guys was the all-in-one PCs and compact desktop PCs. In 2014, we had a 6 terabyte hard disk drives, 3.5-inch form factor for NAS systems, RAID systems, and servers, now with a stack of 6 platters. And finally, in 2018, we had another 2.5-inch invention with 4 terabyte and 4 platters, again for laptops and external USB connected hard disk drives. The 2020s, the era of the cloud. Actually, cloud computing was introduced 2011, 2012, but it took a while to become popular, and it took a while until it was adopted by many users, and it took a while for the cloud storage capacity to be increased as we see it today. To support the cloud capacity requirements in 2019, we introduced the 16 terabyte hard disk drives in the 3.5-inch form factor, now filled with helium instead of air, so that we can fit more and thinner platters. And this development just continued. In 2021, the capacity was at 18 terabyte in the same form factor. In 2022, we had the same form factor of 20 terabyte. And time is moving on, more data is created, and the hard disk drive capacities are increasing. Now we have a 22 terabyte. And soon we will have 24, 28, 32, and even higher capacities. Stay tuned.